the early years of my work, I have to say I often felt guilty because I was having such a good time. I couldn't believe I was allowed to make a living, first of all, listening to this music that I loved and writing about it. And there is something bizarre about spending your days exploring the obsessions of your adolescence. Uh, but as you get older, you want to get different. You want to do different things. First, you're sort of delivering yourself of everything you know. And a part of your early writing, and I notice this in young critics all the time, and I was certainly guilty of this, there's a bit of showing off because you've just entered the stage and you want to prove that you have something. So you're sometimes making statements that are louder than they need to be. This is too many masterpieces and this is beneath contempt, and you're not really dealing with art in the right proportion. For me, one way it changed was that I was primarily concerned with live performance for many years. I loved writing about recordings, but I was out there on average 4 nights a week for the first, I would say, 15 years I was at The Voice. And most of the pieces I did were about what I heard live. And I had invented this job for myself at The Voice. It didn't really exist in any other publication. I never wanted to be a daily critic who goes out every night and writes 300-word reviews. I wanted to write essays. And that gave me the luxury of being able to go out, and if it was lousy, I could just say, well, the hell with that, I'll go hear something else, or I'll go tomorrow night. I was writing for a weekly, and I only wanted to write about things that interested me as a writer as well as a listener. But then my daughter was born in the late 80s. And suddenly I started resenting being out. I wanted to be home. I wanted to be able to put her to sleep. You don't get those chances again. And so without even realizing it first, I started going out less, and I started doing more and more columns about recordings. And in the course of that, I began, my aesthetic changed a lot, I think, because first of all, I was exploring a lot of recordings that I thought I knew cold. But as you get older, they change as you change, and you begin to hear different things. And so that was one, and I still wrote live about important concerts and certainly festivals. But at the same time, something else changed with me, and that's this. The Village Voice, once I got my column after I'd been there for a year, I had a column for 30 years. I wrote it every other week, 1,800 words for the most part, occasionally down to 16, something like that. It was my page. Nobody ever told me how to fill it. After a while, you begin to realize that spending 1,800 words telling people not to buy a recording that they never heard of in the first place is stupid. It's a waste of your time. It doesn't tell the reader anything. So I became much more of an enthusiast. I became much more of a critic who wants to tell you, you got to hear this. That's what I kept looking for. Now, I listen to things blind. I have an assistant, and I have one of those CD players with you can put 5 discs in, and she puts the discs in and keeps the boxes in the other room, and I go through them, and, with the remote, if I see something I like, then I look. Usually I recognize it, but frequently I don't. And that way, frequently you're surprised. People that you think I don't want to bother with will sometimes grab you. And other times, it can go either way. I worry far more about negative reviews than positive ones. If I'm reviewing a record, man, I play that record to death, which is ironic in a way, because if I review a concert, I feel very confident of myself, certainly at this point, and have for most of my career. You're only hearing it once, and then you go to your typewriter and you write the review. But with a record, I never do that. I have to play the record over and over again, and if I don't like it, I have to really kind of come to grips with what is it that I don't like and articulate it. When I teach criticism, the first thing I say, and this sometimes pisses off students, is that opinions are the least part of criticism. We've all had the experience of going with a friend to a movie or a concert, and you leave the theater, and one of you loved it and one of you hated it. And that doesn't mean that one of you is an idiot. That's the way things work. Now, the question is not who's right, because there is no right. The question is, how you articulate it. That's where criticism comes into play. There are reviews that are clearly wrong. Dr. Johnson's famous Life of Savage. He's clearly wrong about the value of Savage, but it's one of the great works in English literature. You can learn more about the artistic expression and what the poet does and how to write about art from that than any number of guys who are terrible writers, who have no original ideas, but who say, yes, Hamlet is a wonderful play. It's a meaningless statement. So it's all about first of all being candid and honest, letting nothing else interfere with your perception of the work, and then finding a means of articulation that somehow makes the work come alive, and if you dislike it, gives your argument some validity. I couldn't write that piece today. I actually have become much more fond of and really excited about Keith's playing over years, but that's why criticism ultimately, at some degree, is about the writer and not the subject. You know, it's very easy if everybody else says he's a genius to echo that, but then you're not functioning as a critic or as a writer in any meaningful way. You've got to take the risk of being wrong. But my feeling, of course, is that if you're genuinely candid and expressive, then you're never wrong, even when you are wrong.